Chair Forcell, you may go ahead and take roll.
Great. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Let us go ahead and start with roll call, and I'm going to call out names, which I wrote down in the order that they appeared on my Zoom screen. Commissioner Johnston.
Johnston, present.
Commissioner Siegel, Vice Chair Siegel.
Present.
Commissioner Scharf.
Present.
Commissioner Danaher.
Present.
Commissioner Jackson.
Present.
And Commissioner Smith.
Present.
And I'm here as well, and Councilmember Cormack.
Here.
Excellent. All right, so I'm wondering, do we have any oral communications from the public today? Can anybody from staff confirm that we don't?
This is Dave Yen. I don't see any hands raised for the public.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Minutes.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner
Yes?
Forcell. I saw a hand raised just now.
Okay.
There's a Tim
right.
Parsley.
Okay, go ahead. We customarily at the UAC give 3 minutes.
For
We're going to be
public comment?
on agenda item 2. There's several of us joining at that time.
Okay, great. If it's on a specific agenda item, then let's go ahead and hold off until that agenda item. I forgot to say communications on anything that is not on the agenda today, we would do at the top of the meeting. So save your thoughts and we will get there shortly. Let's see, agenda review, sorry, approval of the minutes. Do any commissioners have revisions or changes they'd like to propose to the minutes? Doesn't sound like it. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move approval.
Second.
I'll second it.
Okay. Commissioner Johnston,
Yes.
your vote to approve the minutes. We have a motion and a second.
Aye, I vote aye.
Vice Chair Siegel,
Aye.
Commissioner Scharf,
I vote yes.
Commissioner Danaher,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
and I vote to approve the minutes as well.
Looks like the yeses have it.
Yes, I know. All right. Agenda review. Vice Chair Siegel and I met with Dean Batchelor and Carla Daly a couple days ago. We did not propose any changes to the agenda. Unless anybody else has comments, I think we'll just proceed as planned. Are there any reports from commissioner meetings or events? All right. Director Batchelor, do you have a report for us?
I do. Good afternoon, Chair Forcell and commissioners. So I just wanted to start off and talk a little bit about so what's going on with staff during this shelter in place. So approximately still half of the utilities department is still returning to work and the other half are still continuing to work remotely. Almost all the operational staff are physically reporting to carry out field maintenance, operation projects, and we're still responding, of course, to any kind of emergency calls that come in. Customer and services support, staff are still rotating half in 1 week and the other half are staying at home, answering phones. As I mentioned before, one of the advantages that we have with our phone system is that half of folks that are working from home are still able to take phone calls from our customers. So our operations is really fully functional and we continue on that rotational portion. Staff and administration and the resource management group are mostly working from home. Some folks are coming in on a few days here and there. And then our engineering department on the electric side are all working from home. And we do have probably about 15% of our folks that are working on water, gas, wastewater projects are actually coming in. One thing that we had talked about before during the shelter in place, that utilities had suspended the meter reading in the backyards and behind locked facilities. And that at the beginning of June, after our UAC meeting, we lifted those restrictions. So staff's fully functional in our meter reading. We're not estimating meters any longer. And we are still working on zeroing out some of the estimates that we've done in the past. So it's been a long process, but our meter readers are back in place. Staff also is performing checks on symptoms on wearing their face coverings, around other adhering to social distancing protocols. All the staff are provided with PPE equipment, the right training necessary to protect themselves, their coworkers, and their community members. So we are taking every step we can. We've had a few folks out with COVID-19 where they have been mostly none have caught the COVID from being actually at work. They're actually self-containing at home, or they've had a loved one that had been infected, or that they are not feeling all that well, and we're just making sure to give them 14 days to stay at home. So we've had a few of those incidents so far, but we have no large outbreaks in our operational crews that are coming in. Some of the other utility programs that are still moving forward on the projects, we're still carrying out those regular field maintenance and operational projects. As you can see, our staff and some of the contractors out in the community working on special projects. Each year, the utilities performs a routine inspection of the gas distribution system for checking for leaks. And the contractors are also currently walking the residential areas for inspections. So we also do all the mains, and we actually walk the services. So we walk the service from the main where it connects at the street all the way up to the gas meter. So we continue to do that on a yearly basis. And we are having a contractor going along with our folks. So you might be seeing some folks out there working with some of our contractors. Also too is that we're replacing poles, and we're sending out notifications to the areas where these poles need to be replaced in customers' backyards ahead of time, so that we can gain access when we have to replace those poles. There's about 100 poles being replaced as we speak today, and that continues to move forward. Also too is that we talked a little bit about this in the past, about utilities rate assistance and payment relief for residential and commercial customers. When the city declared the local emergency in response to the COVID-19 shelter in place, utilities expanded their payment relief and rate assistance programs, moratorium on disconnects for non-payments and late fees, and full bill payment requirements remained effective until proclaimed the local emergency ends. Currently, our delinquent balances past 60 days are right around $500,000, where our normal baseline runs right around $25,000. So there's quite a lot there. And it's much less than the $2 million that we were forecasting in that. As a reminder, residents may qualify for rate assistance program, which provides 25% discounts on gas and electric charges and 20% on their storm drain fees. Residential and commercial customers can set up bill payment plans for relief from late payments. We also have the Project Pledge program, allows commercial and residential customers in good standings with their own accounts to donate funds on a one-time or recurring basis to help residents in the Palo Alto. Residents who struggle to pay their utility bills may apply for the program for a one-time assistance. So they can only do this one time if they're asking for those assistance. We're also looking at our water. Earlier this year, utilities launched an outreach campaign about energy and water efficiency to help customers keep their bills low. People are working and studying from home. We understand that. Recently, we began a new summer sustainability for kids e-news series to educate younger Palo Alto community members and provide family-friendly activities for children as they spend more time at home this summer. We also are modifying some of our utility programs. As we've talked about, all our visits inside occupancy dwellings remain temporarily on hold. So staff's modifying these programs to do offline services. The virtual home energy efficient Genie website on the topic of indoor air quality will be held on Tuesday, August the 11th. So we are moving to more virtual, and the Home Genie has a web page. And then they're going to hold their first on Tuesday, August the 11th, which is next Tuesday. And then also too is that we sent out, we have our annual water quality report. Utilities provides an annual consumer confidence report on our water quality conditions for the previous year. So this is actually for 2019. It's now available on citypaloalto.org water quality report, or it can be sent in print. So if customers would like to have a hard copy of that, they can contact us at Utilities Communications, cityofpaloalto.org, or they can call 329-2479 to request a printed copy. It's also available in Spanish and Chinese as well. So if somebody was asking for that report, they can find it on the website, or they can contact us and we'll send them out a hard copy of that. Also, just, excuse me, just a little bit of knowledge just to remind everybody that we are going to council on August the 17th to take the electric allowance revenues and fund decarbonization for carbon neutral plan. That is still planned. It's an action item on August the 17th. And report number is 11469 that will be showing up. And we'll be talking to the council about our carbon neutral plans. And with that, I conclude my report.
Thank you, Director Batchelor. Can I ask a quick question about one of the things that you mentioned was the fund for rate relief that people can donate to, and others can request for rate assistance. Are those two well matched, the donations and the requests, or is there a surplus of donations or a surplus of requests?
You know, so the program is actually called Project Pledge. It's been around for quite some time. We have found that we're starting to see more and more residential customers as well as commercial customers donating to this. So we actually have dollars more than what our requests are actually coming in. Which
okay.
So this is, sorry, can I jump in real fast? This is Dave Yun from Utilities. Yeah. So far we have received about $10,000 in donations from Project Pledge, and we've also given out about 10,000, just coincidentally.
But we started off with much more than that, didn't we, Dave?
Yes, our balance is still about 44,000 right now remaining.
Right.
And so Project Pledge predates COVID?
Yes.
Correct.
Ah, okay.
We've always had that program in place.
I see. Thanks for clarifying. All right, well, thank you. Do we have any commissioner comments? Vice Chair Siegel.
Thanks. I just had one question on the water quality report. Was there anything remarkable in that report?
No. You know, we haven't seen any major changes in our quality. You know, we monitor that on a daily basis when we take our tests out in the field. So, and we also take tests at the reservoirs itself. So there was nothing that was earth-shattering that came out of the report that was in the 2018 report as well.
All right. And I don't think we have any unfinished business from last time. So why don't we go straight into new business? So our first item is a discussion and presentation by Professor Richard, I hope I'm saying this correctly, Luthi?
That's right.
On the One Water Resource approach. And I was delighted to learn on the call we had earlier in the week that this is the first of a series of discussions we're going to be having on water and the One Water approach. So I don't know if I'm handing it straight to you, Professor Luthi, or if Carla Daly's going to make a few remarks.
Yeah, so I'm going to introduce Carla Daly, our senior resource planner. She's going to start the presentation, and then Professor Luthi will then also work with Carla on this.
Thank you, Dean,
Carla.
and good afternoon, commissioners. Yes, so on behalf of staff, I'd like to welcome Professor Luthi. We're super excited to have him here this afternoon to be speaking to all of us. This actually came about by a request by Commissioner Johnston quite some time ago, and combination of the UAC having very full agendas and little thing called a pandemic. It just took us a while to get this on the agenda, but happy to have him here now. We staff do work collaboratively with Professor Luthi and some of the other professors up at Stanford in the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department, particularly my colleagues in Public Works who work with the regional water quality control plan operations. Traditionally, we have really had kind of a siloed approach to water supply planning, where those of us on the water supply side engage in water integrated resource plans, which are really plans that look at more traditional, more usually potable water supplies and demand management measures with a little bit of recycled water thrown in for the typical non-potable uses like landscape and sometimes flushing toilets. But with the pressures on water supply in California and other drought-prone areas, we're really all in the industry starting to look at water in a much more holistic way, which brings me to this One Water idea. So it really thinks about water not in the siloed, oh, that's drinkable, that's non-drinkable, but the lines between those two are becoming quite blurred. As you know, we've completed recently our Northwest County Recycled Water Strategic Plan that looked at the effluent from the plant not just as a non-potable supply, but potentially as a potable supply in the future. The other major water source that we haven't ever taken seriously in our water supply planning is stormwater. So that's something that we really want to incorporate into this next round of planning here in Palo Alto. So Professor Luthi's presentation is quite timely and applicable because we're just kicking off that process here in Palo Alto. And you'll hear a lot more about that and about the other regional partners that we're working with on that plan in the next year. So with that, I'd like to welcome Professor Luthi and turn it over to him.
All right, well, thank you very much. I'm honored to be asked to talk to this Palo Alto Utilities Advisory Committee. A copy of my slides were made available earlier, so you can have them for reference. I'll be discussing our water supply reliability in the Greater Bay Area and talk also about our initiative with a group of utilities and cities that we're calling the Bay Area One Water Network. I wanted to just start with one slide though that's a little detailed, but sort of gives a thumbnail sketch of where things sit today. Conservation. Indoor use is trending to less than 50 gallons per person per day. In terms of reuse, we see greater interest in potable reuse, both centralized and partnerships emerging on how to best achieve that. And Palo Alto, Mountain View, Valley Water District are a good example of that. Non-potable reuse, I'll show some examples of decentralized systems and using new technologies. There'll be a push to capture all the wastewater going to the ocean. It's something to be aware of. Stormwater for water supply. We would like to do that for the coastal cities in California. That's water that otherwise just goes to the ocean. There are some constraints here about the geology and where's the best place to do that, to put the water into the ground, to store it. Desalination, brackish water desalination use is growing. seawater desalination, meaning the ocean, it's really a last resort and it's challenging to permit. Water banking, meaning storage in the ground somewhere sort of far away, like for the Valley Water District down in Kern County. That's very efficient and it works because we're all connected by the California Aqueduct. And then working together to help achieve greater vision and greater efficiencies and reliability, that it would engage cities and agencies and working across different water sectors. I just wanted to give this quick picture,
Professor,
and I'm going to move on.
could I interrupt briefly with just a definition question? What is water banking?
Oh, yes. Down in Kern County, near what's essentially Bakersfield, the Kern River alluvial plain was a great place to extract groundwater, and the groundwater was over depleted, and so you have a depleted aquifer there. What we can do is forego a take from the California Aqueduct and let that water flow down to Bakersfield and then put it in the ground there. And then when we want it, we take that water out up here and then do a pump back down in Bakersfield. So it's just like a checking account connected by a long, it works because there's a long pipe, meaning the California Aqueduct. And down there we can store up its capacity for maybe about 2 million acre feet of water. It's huge. Santa Clara Valley Water District, I think, has about 400,000 acre feet there. All right.
Thank you. Thanks for describing that.
Yeah. So here's what I wanted to do is reflect back a little bit on sort of where we come from and do this kind of quickly. I'm a product of the Palo Alto school system and went to Berkeley in 1963. And there's a picture of the yearbook. What I didn't know at the time, well, I didn't know what my career would be. I thought I was going to be a chemical engineer. I'm a chemical engineer, but I work on water. What I didn't know at the time was that the way in which we manage our water in this state was actually at a tipping point. It was at a tipping point from going from building very large infrastructure systems to realizing that the ways in which we had coped with water in the 20th century was changing. What I mean by that is, if we look at first Governor Brown, Pat Brown, referred to as the architect of the Golden State, did a lot, and of course for the UC system and junior colleges and the like. But this is from his first inaugural address when I was in 8th grade. He says, development of our water resources is crucial to every segment of our state. I will soon present a water program which is rational, realistic, and responsive to the needs of all the people of the state. And in terms of water, his granddaddy project here was the California Aqueduct and Oroville Dam. So this was 59. Now at the same time, here in our area, in our backyard, meaning literally Palo Alto and Stanford, another thing was happening. We were putting in the ground these Bay Division pipelines 3 and 4. The aqueducts that bring the water from Hetch Hetchy to the Bay Area, the original ones and the ones that have been refurbished, follow just south of the Dumbarton Bridge. But in the mid 50s and early 60s, pipes were built to go around the south end of the bay and allowed Palo Alto, Stanford, and the communities north of us to hook into the Hetch Hetchy system. Here's a picture from the mid 50s. There's Hoover Tower in the background. This pipeline number 4, the 90-inch pipeline, I actually remember this when they were putting it in back on Junipero Serra Boulevard. I had a Volkswagen at the time, the family Volkswagen. I remember thinking, gee, I could drive down that pipe. Well, this was the high water mark of big dams and big infrastructure. And when we reflect back on the 20th century then, how did we actually cope with water? Well, to be honest, we kind of muddled through, and when we got into droughts, like in the late 80s, early 90s, or in the late 70s, we didn't radically change things. We got by overdrafting groundwater, by depleting rivers, and by the examples I just showed, try to import more water. But in the 21st century, we recognize now that those old ways will no longer work. And in my field, water engineering, it's just so amazing to me what's happened in the past 20 years. One example here, Gavin Newsom, following on the steps of Jerry Brown, very much interested in the water issues of the state. And he following Jerry Brown, directs state agencies to prepare for water resilience portfolio. Portfolio means all of the above approaches. And in this is prioritizing multi-benefit approaches, embrace innovation and new technologies, and encourage regional collaboration. So when we talk about all of the above, then this is a sort of a collage here of the different things we might imagine for our water. Of course, it begins with efficiency, and we've done a lot on that. The purple pipe here, this one actually is a picture of the purple pipe that goes from the Palo Alto plant along Bayshore to the Office Park and Mountain View. That's non-potable reuse. Potable reuse is coming, both in terms of groundwater replenishment and surface water augmentation. Desalination, that's done for wastewater reuse, but also for brackish water. Stormwater harvesting is bigger in the Southland than it is in the Bay Area, but something we're looking at. And Lisa, here's a picture of some of the water banking operations way down there in Kern County. So when I think about all the above, it's these pieces, and of course they are multifaceted. So one comment about conservation, we were all asked to conserve during the most recent drought. Jerry Brown asked us to cut back 25%. As a state, we did very well, just a little more than 24%. But then, as Senator Hertzberg says, we're making this permanent now to conserve our indoor use of water and to bring that down to 50 gallons per person per day by 2030. I'm going to come back and say something more about Bob Hertzberg in just a second, but conservation, we're making progress there. Outdoor restrictions still remain to be determined, but a lot's happened in terms of indoor. When we think of water reuse, the systems are typically broken down into two types. Non-potable, meaning the water that's used outside buildings, landscape irrigation and stuff like that. And it's really not so new. It started in California with the Irvine Water District back in the 1970s when they were building the Irvine Ranch land and the new housing. And when you're building a new development like that, you can put in a system in which you can lay pipes to carry recycled water for irrigation. And so generally, it's hard to reuse water beyond the wastewater treatment plant, but it's easier to do with new developments. And so this is referred to as a dual distribution system. And the Irvine Ranch was the first to put that water in purple pipes to make it distinctive, to show that it was not for human consumption. In fact, you could drink it, you're just not supposed to. It's not good for you, but it won't kill you. This was innovative in the 1970s. Now, where we have come with this is this system here, which shows the South Bay water recycling, which is about 140 miles of this purple pipe that extends all the way from the San Jose Santa Clara wastewater treatment plant south to these different places that you can see. We've had now 3 decades of fiddling, tinkering with this purple pipe system, this sort of reverse distribution system. And some of the problems here is that it's expensive to go back retroactively and put in purple pipe, maybe $2 to $5 million a mile, depending on, you know, if you're in a residential street or a downtown street. We simply can't lay enough pipe. The other thing is you end up pumping the water back uphill, which is energy intensive. And another problem is that for the wastewater treatment plants, they're all located around the edge of the bay here in the Bay Area. You get a little bit of brackish water infiltration. So the water is too salty for long-term irrigation. Between here, where I sit on the Stanford campus, and 5 miles that way at the treatment plant, the salt content of the wastewater doubles. It's not because you people use a lot of salt in your cooking, it's because of infiltration. So that's a problem. So what's the solution here? Well, one thing we can look at is to think about decentralized water reuse. And if we're going to go to a decentralized system now, we can put in a new technology. So I show you a picture here of a demonstration facility built on the Stanford campus to illustrate how we could reclaim wastewater, in this case for non-potable use, irrigation of the Stanford playfields and the like, using new wastewater treatment technology that doesn't require aeration. Instead, without aeration, what happens is the organic matter in the wastewater is converted to CO2 and methane. You can capture the methane, burn it, and make electricity. So these are very energy efficient. The other thing is there's no pipeline, 5 mile or 6 mile pipeline to build back to the Stanford campus from the main treatment plant. And the water is not so salty. In fact, it's fine for irrigation up here without salt management. So the idea here is to think about reuse water locally where it's generated and needed. So this is something we're looking at very seriously for the Stanford campus. Now, another variation on this is the larger office parks and the like. Here's a picture of the facility at the Facebook campus in Menlo Park. These buildings are built right on the edge of the bay, and you know it's windy, and it's at their property. There's not a lot of outdoor space for a regular garden and walkways and stuff. So what they have built are gathering spaces on the roofs of their building, and you can see a picture here. That's actually on the roof of the building. It looks like it's on the ground, but this gathering space then. Very attractive, and it's irrigated with this recycled water, and about 16 million gallons of water a year are recycled here. And you can see the recycling facility fits in fits in a garage space below one of their buildings. And a similar technology like this, same company is building the water recycle system for the Salesforce Tower in the city. The Salesforce Tower will be the largest system like that in North America, probably in the Western Hemisphere. So those were decentralized, non-potable reuse. Now let's talk about potable reuse. It's not as new as you might think. The first demonstration of this was in 1962 in Southern California at a place called the Whittier Narrows, or the spreading grounds at what's referred to as the Montebello Forebay. Here, wastewater from that treatment plant at the Whittier Narrows was treated with 2 additional steps. And then that water is put into spreading basins and then percolates into the ground, moves through the ground, and then is pumped out and becomes part of the drinking water supply for Los Angeles. And you can see 2 of the big spreading grounds here, the Rio Hondo and the San Gabriel spreading grounds. This is the first to advertise this idea of water reuse. And it's with tertiary treated wastewater in over 440,000 acre feet a year. After this, there were some unsuccessful attempts to replicate this elsewhere. But what happened in time was that with new treatment technology, better engagement with the public, a better understanding of the need for recycle, we have a number of systems in place. One is that I'd like to point to is the groundwater recharge system in Orange County. This takes the treated wastewater and runs it through microfiltration, reverse osmosis, and advanced oxidation. 3 important steps that were first pioneered at West Basin, just south of West Basin Water District, just south of LAX. And that's referred to as full advanced treatment. So you take the wastewater, you go through all this full advanced treatment, and then it's essentially pure water that you can put in the ground. We have regulations for that in the state. And most recently, we have regulations in the state that allow you to put that water into reservoirs. And Pure Water San Diego is doing that. It's referred to as surface water augmentation. So this is potable reuse now, wastewater becoming drinking water. It doesn't go directly to your tap. It's indirect, either into the ground or into a reservoir, out of there, treated, and then becomes part of the water supply. I wanted to mention that these systems are popular with the public. And the reason is, where it's done, there's a lot of public outreach and education. And the word I use here is legitimacy. That the water comes from a trusted source, meaning the water department, like we just heard from Dean about the water quality report, and he checks the water for Palo Alto all the time. And if if Dean says this is good, you say, well, okay. And if and your utilities advisory committee says this is good, well, that's a trusted source. And then these systems just didn't come online all at once. There was experience with running, in this case, the system down in Orange County. It ran as a pilot for almost 2 decades. There needs to be a clear need, and there has to be equity in the sense that, everybody is sort of part of the problem and part of the solution. And then, this is what this water looks like. Let's see if I can hold it here. Yeah, it looks like just bottled water. If you go on a tour, they'll give you this. It's tastes just like bottled water. But anyway, this is how much the state has changed from the old problems in San Diego with toilet to tap and such like that, to now with better understanding about the opportunities for potable reuse. What's happening in the potable reuse side is there are discussions about, could we short circuit the need to put water in the ground or into a reservoir, and maybe just do a small amount of holding, or go directly to a drinking water plant, or just go right from the treatment systems to the water distribution system. These experiments on these variations here were done in Wichita Falls in Texas and Big Springs, Texas in 2013 during their drought. And El Paso is looking at a way of doing this other scenario where you go right into the drinking water distribution system. We don't do this yet in California, but I just wanted to show this as some things that are being tried in other places. And this may be something that could be done where you may not have the right opportunities to put water in the ground, or you may not have a reservoir close at hand. I wanted to mention Bob Hertzberg again. And Bob periodically presents to the legislature the idea that, we should recycle all of the water that goes to the ocean. And his most recent attempt here was in, just about a year ago. And it says that by 2040, 95% of the wastewater that goes to the ocean should be recycled. So this hasn't passed yet, but I just wanted to point this out as and sort of like an indication of where things are going. And I guess my comment to this committee and to Palo Alto's utilities is that it's better to plan for how you would do this and take action on your own rather than be forced to under a heavy hammer of some mandate like this. But this is sort of like kind of like a weather vane, say, okay, we should be aware that this kind of legislation is out there, and it's likely encouragement to do the best we can in terms of water reuse. And by the way, this doesn't have to be potable reuse. It could be non-potable reuse, and it could also be for ecosystem benefit too. So this brings me then, I'm going to wrap up here in a minute or two about the Bay Area One Water Network. And this was something that was started about 2 years ago with the idea of having a clearinghouse for stakeholders and water managers in the region to share information, build collaborative capacity, and develop strategies for implementing resilient and integrated water systems. We, in the past year, have had workshops on how we might envision water reuse and how we might collaborate and learn more from one another on stormwater for water supply. You can see the logos here, including the city of Palo Alto that contributed to this effort. It involved Soquel Creek and Monterey One Water, over there in Monterey, all the way up to Marin with Ross Valley and Sonoma County, and from San Francisco to the East Bay. So it was a great effort at looking at over the past year on two themes, stormwater and water reuse. So what we did in the last year with these funds, and there were a modest amount, 5,000 to 10,000 from these various groups, with a little bit more from NSF, who I work with, and a little bit more from the EPA. We had two workshops, facilitated workshops, one on advancing water reuse and one on stormwater as a water source. These reports now are available. These are off the record discussions. So things that are discussed are taken down and are put together in a report, but there's no attribution. And with a smaller group, like it's not kind of like a workshop format. The rules are that, things that are discussed there are not quoted later. Rather, they just they're anonymous in this report. But they do represent a synthesis of the group, about 30 people, representing different sectors and cities and agencies. Now, we've had a public reporting on the stormwater report on July 6th, the next Wednesday. I think it's August 12th. We have a reporting out on the stormwater report, and it's Wednesday. And then it's free. It's open to anybody. I sent a link to how you can join that discussion. It's 1 hour presentation with panelists. And then Dave Sedlak will be the moderator here. And then with some folks from different utilities. And then in September 15th, we'll have another one of these public events talk about future activities for the Bay Area One Water Network. So here are pictures from our workshop. The other top two, the stormwater, the bottom one, the water reuse. And we look at case studies. What lessons can we learn? What are regional drivers and the range of opportunities? And the main thing here is, what can we achieve by working together rather than going alone? And from these kind of discussions, it sparks ideas about possible future actions. So this is what the Bay Area One Water Network is achieving. And in terms of stormwater, what we showed here that, much of the land in the urban area is impervious. It could contribute more to the water supply. Popular with the public. There's pollution prevention. For stormwater, we are regulated out here under what's called MS4 permits, capture and use the stormwater, and that helps with pollution control. It provides urban green space, and it creates habitat. And larger systems are cost competitive with other sources of water. Larger systems might be half of what we pay now for Hetch Hetchy water, maybe $500 to $1,000 an acre foot. But stormwater capture in the Bay Area isn't easy. We have this seasonal precipitation, means we have to store the water that comes in the winter so we can use it now in August. We have steep terrain and clay soils. Some of the most favorable locations have already been developed. We need to collect and use the stormwater in ways that doesn't contaminate groundwater. We need to do research on that. And then we have institutional barriers that stormwater is sort of a stepchild. It doesn't have a clear home. It can be managed by flood control. It has pollution prevention issues with it. If we think about stormwater for water supply, well, that's often another separate entity. So these are some of the challenges we have with stormwater. But what I wanted to leave with was this thought about when we think about water reuse and this portfolio of options in the future, think back about what happened in the most recent drought. And then just a few years ago, in 2014, we passed the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. That was the first time that groundwater has been regulated throughout the state, not just in certain adjudicated areas. And by the way, it was the first time the water management in the state really got changed in 100 years. The last time was in 1914. What happened in Southern California? Well, they were a little bit ahead of us in thinking about coping with water shortages just because of where they are and the overdependence on imported water and lack of water in the Colorado River, for example, and problems in taking more water through to the LA aqueduct. And so they were ready and have moved forward more on reuse, desal, and stormwater. And you think, well, what happened in the Bay Area? Well, we weren't as quick to jump forward. But the next time we have a drought, we're in a drought this year, though our reservoirs are full, but our rainfall was half the average. But we should be thinking about how can regional approaches help? I know I'm talking to a group in Palo Alto here, obviously, but we should be thinking about over the next 35 years, the public and elected officials will expect that the Bay Area and communities will recycle their water, will be more self-reliant, less dependent on imported water. And if we're going to achieve this all of the above strategy that I've been mentioning, a regional network can help in terms of identifying and fostering partnerships among organizations, demonstrating and optimizing new technologies, and engaging communities and public and elected officials so change can actually happen. I feel like I've covered a lot of ground, but I wanted to give you a thumbnail sketch of kind of like things that I've seen now going back to 8th grade to now. But there's a great opportunity, I think, for us to achieve a lot in the way that we think about how we use and reuse and manage our water. And I don't know if there's time for questions. I'd be happy to entertain any, or you could just shoot an email to my email address, luthi@stanford.edu. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I think we will grab a little time for a bit of discussion. First, I want to see, go to the public and see if there is any public comment on this topic.
I do not see any hands raised.
Okay. All right. Looks like Commissioner Johnston had something to say.
Yes, I want to thank the staff for scheduling Professor Luthi. I had an opportunity to hear him make a presentation probably a year ago when we were talking about recycled water use. And it seemed to fit in so well with kind of what we were talking about, trying to expand our sources of water, that I thought it was helpful to me, and I thought it'd be helpful to everybody to hear this. So one question that I had is, it sounds like, Professor Luthi, that you need a separate system for collecting and treating groundwater for stormwater than the system you have for collecting and treating wastewater. Is that right? Or can those systems be combined or co-located, or some efficiencies there?
The answer is a little tricky. Back east, the main problem with stormwater is that the stormwater and the wastewater are in the same pipe. That's just because that was the way systems were built around 1900. Here, we keep the stormwater out of the wastewater system. And that's by design, so that when we get a heavy storm, we're not flooding the wastewater treatment plant and exceeding its capacity. Now, having said that, there are, with conservation, our wastewater treatment plants are having some excess capacity. And so there are opportunities to take maybe some of the early storms or late storms and divert some of that water to the wastewater treatment plant so that it could become part of the water reuse. Another idea is, in the summertime, these concrete channels that you see with the urban runoff, they're not completely dry. You have the words that are used as sort of like urban drough, meaning from car washing, over watering on lands and stuff like that. And what they do in Southern California, in the city of LA, for example, is during the summertime, they have some valves on those stormwater systems to divert that urban drough to the wastewater treatment plant. And that's then treated, and eventually that water can get recycled. That's not really done right now, but it could. What that does is it protects the beach. And the big thing with the beaches are bacteria. And, you know, there are closings of the beach periodically because of it's unhealthy swimming in the beach. So that's what they do there. So here too, we could think about, could we do a better job of managing our pollutants to the bay by capturing the low flows and directing them to the wastewater treatment plant? And then as we expand our water reuse, we have more water for water reuse because we've captured that water.
Thank you. That's helpful to me. And I hope that this is something that the staff will be thinking about. Maybe you already are, but be thinking about when we are talking about ways to reuse water generated in Palo Alto.
We have permits for our stormwater, and you know, summertime flows are not big, but they're more concentrated. And so, you know, there is a question here about if I capture the sort of lower flows, am I helping a lot? And that's something to study. To what extent are the low flow, more concentrated systems, if I could treat that, how far does that help me in meeting my MS4 requirements? I'll go one more. With chemical constituents, it's mass discharge. It's not concentration based. So.
Oh. Yep. Are there any other commissioners with questions or comments?
Jackson.
Yes, Commissioner Jackson.
Hi, yes, Professor Luthi. You mentioned that I guess in the Western U.S. we do segregate wastewater from groundwater or stormwater. So, and that provides some benefits to us. I wanted to, this is a sort of a big stretch here, mental leap, but another topic that we talk about a lot at the UAC is, you know, decarbonization and electrification, which, you know, long story short, it's like, let's get rid of natural gas and let's electrify our homes and businesses. And this requires, this is a long, complicated topic we're not going to talk about tonight, but ultimately it results in basically, business, builders and people who are building houses and commercial structures making changes to the way they construct those buildings and those structures. And so my question here is there a potential over the very long term, how should we be mandating or motivating people to segregate water supplies at a local level? So like right at my house, I assume I have one water main coming in from the city, and I think I just have one sewer line. Should I have two lines coming in? One's gray and one's clean, and should I have a gray water out and a wastewater going out? If I was building a new house, for example, would that be a better long-term thing for people to be thinking about?
Well, it'd be nice to have, Don. I don't know where you live, but if you were near Greer Park, it would be possible because you already have a recycled water line that goes over to Greer Park. So maybe you could tap into it. But, if you're farther up by Palo Alto High School, there's no pipe up there. And then it's just, it just becomes very expensive to put a purple pipe back in the street, but with redevelopment, you can do things like Facebook, for example. Here on the Stanford campus, we have a lake water irrigation system. We have Little Felt Lake, the other side of 280. So, all right, this is not Stanford policy, all right? This is Dick Luthy's idea. But my idea is that we recycle our water here and we can put recycled water into the lake water irrigation system and then water all of our, use that in all our outdoor spaces and save that Felt Lake water for later in the year when we need more water for irrigation. But we're fortunate we just have, we have that lake water system, and we also have a purple pipe system that goes down right across the front of the campus, right there in front of the main quad that we can tie into. But, it works for Stanford because we are thinking about this idea of a decentralized system. We have the need for the play fields. As there's a lot of water efficient landscaping around, but still, with play fields, athletic fields, and the golf course, there's a need for water, and we can satisfy that with recycled water.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, another example, by the way, is Redwood City, where the community on the bay side, what do they call it, Redwood Shores, was going to get purple pipe. for irrigation of their front yards and stuff. And some people wondered, well, why do we get that recycled water and other places in Redwood City don't? And there was controversy about that. Eventually what happened is the recycled water system went across Bayshore and up there to where City Hall is and that sort of thing. But that was an issue of equity, you know, Don, that some people thought they weren't too enamored with the idea of having recycled water in their front yard, and they questioned why us and not them. And so when I point to, this is an important thing, when I showed you the map where I showed you the map for San Diego, it's not the city of San Diego, it's the whole county. And same thing with Orange County. It's essentially everyone's part on top of that same aquifer. So they're all in it together. But these are good questions to keep bringing up about how can we evolve to a new state. Maybe it's taking recycled water to the industrial park, you know, and then saying, okay, now I got a spine line and I can go off from there to other places. It's not so expensive.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, I have a couple comments, but and I see Councilmember Cormack. Are there any other commissioners with questions or comments? I will do my piece and then hand over to Councilmember Cormack. Yeah, as everybody's saying, thank you very much. This is super interesting. I'm curious, you mentioned that California does not allow for direct potable reuse, but there are some projects in Texas.
Yes.
I think you mentioned El Paso and one other location. How far along are those and how are they going? Like, is the public drinking potable recycled water at this point?
In the case of Big Springs and Wichita Falls, the answer is yes. For a while that happened, but when the drought ended, they discontinued that. Now El Paso is building the system, so I don't know if it's actually online, Lisa, but it's been approved by the the equivalent of the State Water Board. So that's going forward.
But there's an existence proof of two locations where during a drought, the public was accepting of recycled water directly into the water system.
It didn't go directly into the water pipe. It went to the water treatment plant. So normally,
but it wasn't pumped through the ground, I guess, was the distinguishing feature, right?
It didn't have this, it didn't have this great big natural buffer.
Right.
It short-circuited that and say, let's just send the water to the water treatment plant. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think, you know, I guess I sort of like the idea of the natural buffer where it can be done, you know, but if it can't, you say, well, let's take it to the water treatment plant. And then and that gives you a whole nother set of, you know, treatment steps. But anyway, it's interesting to look at this and say, how are things changing? Now, by the way, in Texas, things are a little different there. Though Big Springs and El Paso, they were approved as sort of one-offs, you know, just because El Paso is doing it now doesn't mean Dallas can do it. California has a different approach, you know, groundwater replenishment regulations. These are for the state.
I see.
Surface water augmentation for the state. You know, so this is, Lisa, and I think this is really important that now you say, all right, we have well-considered plans on how this should be done, how it should be monitored, residence times in the ground, percent of water you can put into a reservoir, that kind of thing. And so this is why I think it's important that, well, in California, we had these rules come that now facilitate the groundwater replenishment and the reservoir augmentation.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting. Well, I imagine you folks have other business or want to get on to dinner. I will just say, I enjoy talking about this, and AC, thanks for suggesting that I can talk to you all. I'd be happy to answer any questions from any of you that are listening now. Just shoot an email and I'll try my best.
I think we do have one more comment from from Councilmember Cormack.
Oh, okay.
If you can hang on for another couple minutes, and then we'll let you go.
I'm good for a while.
Thank you, Chair Forcell. Professor Luthi, thank you for being here today and reminding us that all water is recycled. I wonder, since you started with history, if you would recommend the book by Mark Eriks, The Dreamt Land, if that's something that you've read or if you're familiar with his work, and would you recommend that to the commission?
You know, I'm not familiar with that, but
okay.
There are various books like that that are interesting to read about.
Well, if you have one about the history of water in California that you'd recommend, feel free to send that along to us and let us know. I see you're looking for it.
Yeah, I did. I think I sent a copy of a paper that kind of does a little bit of retrospective in each of these areas, and then does a little bit of forward looking. Didn't I send that to you all? Maybe I didn't.
At any rate, I just think it's helpful for the commissioners who are less familiar with water in California, since you brought up the history, to understand a little bit further back of where we've come as a state. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because that's important. And then I just wanted to say, in response to Commissioner Jackson's question and the discussion about, should we be doing things differently in residences? As always, I know our utilities director reminds us about how much of what we have here in Palo Alto is really based on our commercial sector. And so your comments about, extending things out at the research park, they're also consistent with the work that we as a city might be able to do in terms of the environmental design that we're contemplating if we ever get to do our Coverly rebuild. Definitely gray water reuse there was contemplated. So I just wanted to let Mr. Jackson know that that's something the city can do separate from mandating things for residences. So thank you again.
Yeah, okay. I'll send you all a copy of a paper that'll at least get you started, and I'll think about a good book, okay? Well, everyone have a good day. It was a pleasure to meet you all.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for coming.
Bye.
All right, so I think we will move on then to our second item, and we will take a brief break after the second item. We have a discussion of the fiber network expansion project, and I know we had a couple members of the public, so maybe we can start with those folks.
Sure, we have one public. Daniel Doltz, please speak.
And if we can get that 3-minute timer up.
Cool, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Excellent, great. Chair Forcell, commissioners and staff, good evening. I'm Daniel Dulitz, the organizer of the Palo Alto Hills Broadband Working Group. I've lived in Palo Alto for 20 years, and over 10 of those years on Upper Page Mill Road just beyond Foothills Park. You provide us with electricity, water, and sewer service, for which we thank you. But we were never served by the Palo Alto Cable Co-op. We were also excluded from the service area when the city sold the cable co-op to AT&T. Wired broadband is not available here. Satellite service cannot be used for video conferencing or other real-time work. So all of us up here have relied upon microwave links. There are not many choices, and they're all overwhelmed due to demand for working at home in these times. And even when microwave service is available, it is expensive and often unreliable. So I was thrilled to hear through the grapevine that CPAU had a fiber endpoint a quarter mile away from us at the water reservoir. But CPAU does not provide commercial fiber network backbone in our part of the city. And there is no other way for citizens of Palo Alto to access that data connection. We really need it. We present to you today this petition with 26 signatures. We ask 3 things of you as part of the planning process for the fiber network expansion project. First, to remember us and remember that we have been unserved by the city for 30 years. Second, to take steps to make your existing fiber data endpoint available to us, whether that be under terms of the commercial dark fiber service available elsewhere in the city or other terms. Please consider a public-private partnership where existing wireless ISPs can connect to your fiber endpoint to provide us service at very low cost to the city. If we form a co-op to run broadband to our homes, please commit to connecting to us. Finally, please work with us. Tell us how to be good partners for you, because you have a data endpoint that in these pandemic times we desperately need. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Tim Parsi.
Hi, my name is Tim Parsi, one of Daniel's neighbors for 7 years at 3810 Pagemore Road. I've been a resident of Palo Alto for about 15 years. Firstly, thank you for your time in addressing this issue. A lot of us are very excited because we need your help. As we'll elaborate a little bit later on, we're all aware that the internet has become an essential utility for living and working. But those of us Palo Altans who live up in the hills have had to be diligent and resourceful to get effective broadband. Our options have been limited to line of sight, long-range wireless or microwave, as Daniel described, which can vary from house to house. It depends on where your house is as to whether you're going to get service, and where there are only 3 providers with beaming locations that we can get to choose from: Coastline, Etheric, and Ridge. If you're lucky enough to get one of these line of sight providers, you're still faced with high costs. The service slows when it's cloudy or when it's raining, so it's a little bit tricky from those perspectives. But the reason why we see this now as an urgent issue, this petition, is because one of our favorite providers, the one that really is the only one for several of our houses, Ridge Wireless, just lost its lease in Mountain View and can no longer provide the service to us. So several of us are really in deep doo-doo at this point as a result. So while continuously resourceful and community-minded, we now need your help to get access to the utility as other Palo Altans do.
Okay, next we have Kathleen Roscoe.
Okay. Good evening, commissioners and staff. Thank you for taking our public comment tonight. My name is Kathy Roscus. I live at 4020 Pagemo Road, right across the street from Daniel Dulitz. I've been a resident of Pagemo Road since 1991. That's 29 years. I just wanted to emphasize the point that broadband is vital to professionals who are now navigating the work from home environment. The internet has always been challenging in the hills, as you've heard. Last year, fast internet was a luxury and we made do. Now it is not. I live and work in Palo Alto, and I'm trying to do that from home using internet service that, as you have heard, often slows or fails entirely in cloudy or rainy weather. Try to have a Zoom call when it just cuts out because it's cloudy. And now our children are trying to attend school and college in the work from home environment. This spring and into summer, and I'll tell you, we're getting ready for fall. My college-age daughter did just that from our house. So just to be clear, that was a significant challenge, competing interests to get both of our jobs done. The city has underinvested in data service for our neighborhood for more than 25 years. Please do the right thing and make us part of the fiber network expansion plan. There is a need and it is urgent. And with your help, now it could be a possibility. Thank you.
And finally, we have Mike Carlton.
Yes, hi there. My name is Mike Carlton. I have lived here on Pagemo Road more than 15 years. We have never had an option for DSL or cable high-speed service. Like others have mentioned, our only options have been wireless options, which are unreliable, not unusual for it to drop. If the city could provide a way for us here in the hills to connect to the existing fiber endpoint, would be very valuable to all of us. I, like others, are working at home trying to get my job done. Most of the people on this petition, on this call, are within 2,000 feet of that existing fiber endpoint. There are businesses up here who might be able to pay commercial rates to run fiber to their premise. the city could contract with private wireless ISPs. There are several, like we've been mentioned, to provide last mile service, which all of us would happily sign up for. There's even options where we in the area could form a co-op to provide that last mile service. But you guys have the facility. Please make it available to us or a professional organization to bring us into the net. Thank you.
That's the last public speaker I see.
All right, thank you all. David, Tim, Kathy, and Mike for sharing your thoughts. We will turn next to the presentation. I'm not sure who the speaker is.
Thank you, Chair Fursell. So staff felt that it was timely to bring our new consultant firm on to talk a little bit about the high level expansion of this fiber network. And I'm pleased tonight to have Mr. John Honker, who is the president and CEO, and Mr. Jory Wolf, who is the VP of Digital Innovations from Magellan tonight, that will be making a presentation. A little bit about John. Like I mentioned, he's the president and CEO. He's seasoned broadband telecom executive with 20 years of experience in carrying an ISP broadband provider markets, as well as he's the head of the internet services for Columbus Networks, which is now part of the Liberty Global family of companies. He started to grow the Columbus internet service businesses from basically having nothing to over $1 million in annual revenues in 6 years. He's one of the key founders from Magellan Advisors. He led his company's growth of broadband, consulting, engineering, construction management, and operations. And today, Magellan Advisors has become the go-to firm for municipalities and utilities, co-ops, and regional organizations. With over 400 clients, 50 networks, and built over 100 million fiber connections, Magellan continues to connect at the light of speed. And then Mr. Jory Wolf, who is the VP of Digital Innovations, joined Magellan after 22 years as the CIO of the city of Santa Monica, California, where he launched Santa Monica City's Wi-Fi, which provided free internet services to the public through the network of 32 hot zones and wireless coverage to most of the major commercials. He created Santa Monica's CityNet, which is 100 gigabyte broadband supporting environmental and local businesses. And he has over 35 years of experience in the information technology, including municipality fiber, fiber to the home, and smart initiatives. His teams have received over 50 awards for innovation and technology and projects. And during his career in 2012, he received the CIO Lifetime Achievement Award from Los Angeles Business Journal. So with that, I would like to welcome both of them tonight to talk a little bit about our phases and where we're going to be going in the next probably year or two. So with that, John and Jory, welcome.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Batchelor. Pleasure to meet everyone, and it's a pleasure to present to the Commission at this UAC meeting. That was a great introduction. I couldn't do it better myself. So I'm going to pass on that and dive right into the presentation. And I think one thing that's really important as we get into this project, we see a lot of opportunity for Palo Alto. You know, we're at a transformative stage in Palo Alto where the utility is modernizing, and we have an opportunity to lay the foundational groundwork for communications infrastructure to support the utility needs. And alongside that, as we get further into the project, into the later phases, you know, demonstrate and identify ways that can be leveraged to support fiber to the home and broadband within the community, which we'll go through in just a moment. So just a bit about Magellan and our background. We are very, very heavily focused on electric utilities, municipal electric utilities. We work with about 100 across the country. And, you know, in both the grid modernization as well as the broadband sector. And we see, you know, major overlap between the two, because again, the infrastructure is relatively similar from a distribution standpoint. The services being provided are both critical and are both community centric, and municipal utilities have strong capabilities to manage critical services. We work across the country, heavily in California, of course, with other municipal utilities such as Glendale, Rancho Cucamonga, San Leandro, others in California that are moving through the same process of building fiber networks, or expanding fiber networks in this case. I would say the first thing that we look at when we talk about Palo Alto is the importance of the fiber network that you have. It's a major asset. When we look at Palo Alto and what CPAU has accomplished in building that network over years, it's a testament to the need in the area and the forward-looking perspective that the leadership team and staff has had at CPAU to continue to build out its existing network. So again, we provide turnkey services across the whole spectrum of building, planning and building fiber networks. We are a very hands-on firm, a lot of construction experience. We've passed about 1 million homes with fiber and 1 million electric meters with fiber. We do everything from engineering to planning to financing, construction, and overall operations, specifically for municipalities and municipal utilities. Today, we have about 50 networks across the U.S. that are up and running and active with live services. So I thought I would walk the UAC through a high level flow chart of the fiber project and the fiber expansion as it's built in a phased approach with 4 phases. We started in phase 1, which you can see in green here, started in mid-July, and phase 1 really covers what we call a high-level design and cost estimate for the expansion of simply the utilities network, right? The utility itself, CPAU has specific needs around fiber communications infrastructure to support its grid and its distribution system. So we're going to be looking at things like your AMI placement and your upcoming potential AMI services, and how the fiber should be expanded to support AMI, keeping costs down for AMI distribution, and making sure that the AMI system is very redundant and well connected. We'll also be looking at SCADA, telemetry. We'll also be then looking at wireless applications for public safety and public works, really, again, focused on how to modernize the city the best way possible and get more bang for your buck out of expanding the existing network, not only for CPAU, but for other city applications that can run, right, to make the city more efficient and also to improve municipal capabilities. So that phase is really focused on a 6 to 7 month period. We started in July. We're looking at sort of the end of the year timeframe to be completed with that phase. Coming out of phase 1 is really phase 2, and I'll go into detail on each one of these phases on the next slides. But phase 2 is the detailed backbone engineering design for phase 1, for really what we call the utility and municipal expansion. Phase 3 is where we start actually looking at fiber to the premise and fiber to the home. And the goal here is to really help CPAU and the city understand the different alternatives, right? The city's studied this for a long time and has come up with different scenarios for build out. What we're going to do is bring some innovation to that and look at some other alternative ways the city could potentially build out fiber to the home, creating some opportunities that may come with the phase 1 and the phase 2 design. So as we start to expand the fiber network for the city's own purposes, it's going to catalyze an opportunity for fiber to the home. And we're going to walk through a number of scenarios and business cases with the team to help identify the best ones in that. Phase 4 will then also, if the city chooses to move forward, because at each one of these phases, there's a checkpoint with the city, and then the city will effectively provide guidance and approval to move to the next stage. If the city decides to move beyond each stage, and for example, from phase 3 to phase 4, we would move into a formal and what we call a low-level engineering design for the fiber to the home network, which would provide full engineering, cost estimates, and bills of materials for the fiber to the home broadband network if viable options are found and the city decides to move forward. So I talked deeply about phase 1 and the applications that we're going to cover in phase 1. Phase 2 is again going to be focused on very deep assessment of what those engineering plans look like, right? Detailed engineering with detailed fielding. So we'll have field teams on the ground walking out each route. And the goal of doing that is to understand the subsurface utilities, to understand existing running lines, where we can place fiber to minimize community impact throughout the city. We'll also be looking at permit authorities with Palo Alto and any of the other permitting agencies that may have jurisdiction over the initial fiber expansion. We'll be looking at ways to update your construction standards as well, and identifying ways that we can help reduce the costs of future construction while protecting the community at the same time. Our final deliverables in this phase are also to create the final set of construction prints, bills of materials, and a construction bid package that the city can then take out and put out for bid competitively with construction contractors. There's one other portion with this scope that I failed to mention, and that's where Jory's team from the policy side will come in. And this will be part of really phase 1 is helping the city define, update, and streamline some of its policies around fiber and broadband. Jory, do you want to talk about those for a few minutes?
Sure. We'll be concentrating on areas regarding dig once and joint build opportunities from others that are building in the public right-of-way. We'll be looking at capital projects, both from the city and from the utility, to look at opportunities to cost effectively do net neutral build through joint trench internally. And we'll also be looking at one-touch make ready for your utility poles and policies related to those that would be using your assets, as well as looking at multi-unit right of entry and how to work with developers and property owners in making their units ready for broadband connectivity. Lastly, we'll be looking at policies related to various types of construction, and we specifically focused on microtrenching and defining how microtrenching might be of use in Palo Alto.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Jory. And before we move on to phase 3, are there any questions that we can answer on phases 1 or 2 from the UAC?
I do have one question, which is motivated by the community from Palo Alto Hills that we just heard from. Is the Page Mill area, if it's not covered already with our fiber, will they be part of AMI and SCADA and the other things that we're looking at in phase 1?
So our assessment will really be looking at the entire city, Commissioner Forcell. So if they're within the city limits, absolutely. Our scope has been defined to evaluate the entire city for fiber expansion. So they would definitely be included in that if that's if they're in the city limits.
Got it. Thank you.
I had one question as well. Which, when I'm looking back at the timing, is it, so for phase 1 and phase 2, it's about a year or so, right? And then I think I heard you say that that would just, that would get the city to a place where they could then seek bids, design an RFP or something. And so I'm wondering, for the city or for the utilities network itself, what would you, based on all your experience, estimate it would take time-wise to go from where we are today to actually putting in that infrastructure that you identify, just for the city?
So for the city piece, you're Commissioner Siegel, you're about right on the time frame. So it's about, if we go back to our timeline slide here, we're looking at about 12 months for completion of phase 1 and phase 2. And the way we generally like to work is, when we get into the detailed design, we don't have to wait till the very, very end of that project to potentially release an RFP. So because we realize time is of the essence across these projects. So, we may be able to shorten the time frame and build that construction package ahead of time and release that sort of at the 90% phase. Some utilities will do it that way. Some will wait till the 100% design is complete and then release it. So we'll look from guidance from staff on how they would like to do that. But assuming a longer case scenario in, say, 12 months until the construction package were released, you could potentially see construction starting and mobilization starting in month 15, and another 12 months of construction to 18 months of construction beyond that. So you're looking probably getting into full-blown construction in about a year and a half.
A year and a half after phase 2 is complete? Is that what you're saying?
No. A year and a half from the beginning. So 18 months you could potentially be in construction, but that may vary just depending on, again, the final design. But that's kind of what we're looking at now, and I'll for the that's a good average, I would say, for construction,
including the whole contracting process. Okay, that's quicker than us. And I had one other question, which I don't know if it's a phase 2 or phase 3 question, but if City Council approved it, is there a way to contract the timing? So you have phase 1 and phase 2, which is the backbone side of it, and then phase 3 and phase 4, which is more fiber to the premises. Is there a way to consolidate those if that's what City Council decided to do?
We could do that, absolutely. Because again, we would be looking at that point two very complementary designs. We'd be looking at the backbone plus what we call the feeder distribution design. And the feeder distribution network is what really creates, is what's really important in phase 3 and phase 4, meaning how do you get fiber from the backbone into the individual neighborhoods in a cost-effective way and quickly. So that could be compressed if the city decided to do so.
Let's see, Greg Scharf, then Commissioner Johnston, and then I think I saw Commissioner Danaher's hand flicker.
I'll deal with any other questions later. I'm good, thanks.
Okay, Commissioner Scharf.
Thank you. So I just wanted to clarify, I was a little confused there. So right now, phase 1, 6 to 7 months, then we move to phase 2, 5 to 7 months. So that's basically a year. And then we have another 18 months to get through phase 4. And you just said we could do 3 and 4 at the same time as phase 1 and 2. Is that what I understood? If we wanted
we could condense, yeah, we could start phases 3. Well, so phase 3 would be the next natural phase, but we could slide phase 3 into really phase 2 and compress those two, and be looking at, once we have sort of a detailed backbone design ready to go in phase 2, then we could start to compress phase 3, and we could start really looking at the fiber to the home capabilities and how we would, the alternative business cases to get fiber to the home to different portions of the city. So that could slide into the sort of the front end of the phase 2 design.
And was the only reason that wasn't done that way because the city council wanted to conserve cash, or why? what was the thinking behind that? Do you know?
I don't actually. I'm not sure what the intent was behind sort of phasing it this way.
I can speak. This is Dave Yen, Utilities Strategic Business Manager. I think the intent was to do a incremental approach. So I think the phase 1 and 2 were for the city usage for SCADA and AMI. And then phase 3 was to get a cost estimate and a business case and see if we can utilize the other utilities in building it out to reduce the costs.
I mean, because it's a separate fiber fund that this money is coming from. Is that correct, Dave?
That is correct. There is about 30 million or 32 million in that fund currently, but based on previous studies, the estimate was closer to 80 million to build it out completely.
I mean, I guess if it was me, I would suggest to the city council, and I mean, probably need discussion, that we combine phase 2 and 3 and get a clearer picture. I mean, the money's there in the fiber fund. I don't see it. I really don't see any advantage to pushing it out in that sequential way. I mean, it seems that we're really just taking an extra 6 months to do it without really needing to do it that way.
I think it's definitely possible to merge phases 2 and 3, and cost-wise, it wouldn't add too much to it. It's phase 4 that's the high bill.
Right. So I mean, I think, but I mean, after phase 3, the city council should have a lot of information, right? I mean, then you've talked about the business cases and a lot of that stuff. That's correct?
That is correct.
You thought about it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think there's a real focus with COVID now on getting good, broadband. And I think the moment is here, as they might say, to really push this forward and think about it. I mean, it's too bad the construction actually couldn't be going on during COVID because there's no traffic on the streets and it's less disruptive to people's lives and that kind of stuff. But anyway, that would be I would definitely suggest to the city council that they relook at the phase 2 and phase 3.
Okay, thanks.
And maybe we can, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, maybe we can provide some clarity around phases 3 and 4 and just talk about the detail in those to help the commission understand what's all happening in those 2 phases.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, we have another couple commissioners who wanted to speak. Do you want to get your comments in before the presentation continues to phases 3 and 4? Commissioner Johnston and Smith, or do you want to wait until the presentation has gotten further along?
My preference is to chime in now, if you don't mind, okay. Chair.
Go ahead.
I just want to echo what Greg Scharf just stated, and I agree wholeheartedly. I think having been part of the team that not drafted, but certainly edited the RFP for this, I think at that time when we were doing it, we certainly didn't have COVID-19, and we certainly didn't have a significant need like we do today, and we've heard from the public. So I do think that there is an opportunity, and it is a good opportunity right now to accelerate some of this programming, and I think we should take advantage of it. What's nice about combining phases 2 and 3 is, to Greg's further comment, it does provide council some significant background and detail with respect to cost projections for building out an entire network. We've looked at fiber to the node, we've looked at fiber to the premise. What we've lacked is the detail, and I think that was one of the sole focuses of this entire effort. It'd be nice to have. Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson?
I also second the comments of Commissioner Scharf and Commissioner Smith, but I had a further timeline question, which is, I understand at the end of phase 2, we have basically a bid package for construction. And then I wasn't sure if I heard you say that construction itself would take about 3 months of mobilization and then another 12 to 18 months for completion of the construction to get us to the system to support the city uses. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what we're estimating right now. So we think that 3 months of mobilization to get the contractor onboarded, plus then let's, to be conservative, say 18 months. Again, what's unclear right now is the actual size of the backbone, how many miles the expansion of the backbone will be. because you're building off of your existing network, you're expanding that, that existing resource. So it could be 18 is probably a reasonable number. It could be longer though, depending on the size. So I think if you think maybe 18 to 30 months, we have a very similar project going on in the city of Boulder right now, which is expanding their backbone in Boulder, Colorado, in a very similar way for very similar purposes. And we're on about a 2-year construction schedule to build about 65 miles of fiber backbone. And that's a very tough place to build with the winters. So, you know, again, if we can mobilize contractors, move them quickly, 18 to 30 months is probably a reasonable time. 30 being the very long end of the stick, 18 being the short.
But basically, we're looking at 2.5 years plus from now before the system is really ready to go.
That's a correct statement, yes.
Okay. I assume that if I asked the same question for completion of phase 4, actual construction of phase 4, that'd be much harder to talk about because you really don't know what the scope of that project is.
You're right. That's right. Depending on the number of homes, the size of the project, it could be short, could be very long.
Okay, thank you. Time to get going.
Why don't you go ahead and then we'll have some more discussion when you're done with the presentation.
Sure. Thanks, Commissioner Forcell. So, phase 3, again, which we're talking about, we're moving into the fiber to the premise phase and the evaluation of different business models for that, but in different alternatives. The city's looked at this in the past, of course. What we're going to do is sort of bring some innovation to that and look at some incremental and lower cost and lower risk approaches over time to build out fiber to the home. Where we have phase 1 network designed, it gives us opportunities to potentially launch pad off of that existing backbone fiber to reach areas that are close to it, right? In close proximity to that backbone fiber, we can potentially serve fiber to the home. And that may be one strategy that you want to look at when you're considering this. A lot of utilities do this, and they will build their backbone, and then they'll architect a buffer, maybe a half-mile buffer with around that existing backbone, and be able to serve those customers at a potentially lower cost in the first phase, and then continue to build that out over time. So the idea is these are very capital intensive projects. So we want to look at ways to match capital with risk and also revenue, right? So the other things that we'll be looking at as we start to consider the build out is integration with other projects that the city has going on now. So any electric rebuilds and underground projects can be potential utilization for fiber to the home. We have a client up in Lehigh in Utah that is rebuilt about 2/3 of their electric system, and they put in duct alongside their primary electric. And now that's being used to substantiate their potential fiber to the home project, saving them about 20% on the entire build. So there are other projects looking at your existing road, water, sewer, other capital projects to offset some of the costs, because as those projects are disturbing the ground, it gives us an opportunity to put fiber in at a much, much lower cost. So we'll be evaluating the impact quantitatively to the overall fiber to the home build by looking at each one of these projects and seeing how significant it is, right? If it's a 5% difference, it may not be so significant. If it's a 30 or 40% difference, you know, we're talking real capital dollars in terms of, you know, building fiber to the home. As we also look down the road, we'll assess what the wireless infrastructure role could be. You know, we're getting closer to wireless last mile. We're not saying that that is a viable technology today as a replacement for fiber, but there are strides being made. And especially as we look out over the next few years, we'll be looking at it, whether there could be technological innovations that improve wireless enough to substitute it as a last mile access to the house, to the home. This is important because we shouldn't think of fiber being the only technology we should use, but we also shouldn't think about fiber as a technology that's going to be replaced, because as we look at all of the providers out there that are building fiber to the home now, we look at all the utilities throughout the US that are building fiber to the home, they're continuing to invest billions and billions of dollars in this. Now, if wireless improves and becomes either a complement or replacement for the last mile portion of fiber, right, meaning from the road, from the right of way to the actual home, that can be a technology that slides into a potential network and alongside the fiber to help offset some of the costs down the road. So we never think about fiber in the last mile as a potential asset that's going to become defunct over time. We think of the wireless complementing it as, you know, technology evolves. So as we go through this analysis, the idea is to build capital and financial models to evaluate with the city, right? Bring the intelligence to city leadership and help them make decisions on which, if any of these alternatives is the best for the city to move forward with. And at the end of phase 3, the city will basically give us guidance as to if and when they want to move forward, which would then trigger phase 4. And phase 4 is effectively the actual low-level design, the engineering design for the option or options that the city chooses in phase 3. So phase 4 is very similar to phase 2, where we're talking about low-level engineering, which, and I won't get too technical here, but effectively the low-level design fielding of every street line and every running line of the fiber throughout the neighborhoods. Again, the goal there is to understand existing utilities, offset separation, and minimize community impact from any kind of construction that would be happening in the city right of way. With that, we'll be generating a final set of construction prints if the city decides to move forward, permit packages, and then a construction bid print package along with the phasing plan and a final RFB or RFP for a construction contractor that the city would like to select. So this last phase would effectively be the end of the engineering piece. You would be out to bid at that point for fiber to the home and selecting a construction contractor for the actual build. And that really concludes our presentation on phase 3, phase 4. Are there any other questions that we can answer or on any of the slides, any of the fiber project?
No, this is Mike Dan Hurley. I share everybody else's concern about the pace of this and the frustration that it takes so long. So anything you can do to accelerate that for the discussions would be worthwhile.
Commissioner Smith?
Thank you for the presentation. Based upon your quick assessment thus far of the city, and it sounds like we've not yet dug into the details, but based upon your quick assessment, what are some of the challenges and hurdles that you think the city of Palo Alto should be, and the population should be aware of?
Commissioner Smith, in reference to the fiber backbone or the fiber to the home portion of the project?
I think if you, right, so thank you for an opportunity to clarify. So I think the fiber backbone within the city, I think it's quite robust, which is why we have a significant balance available for doing a program of this nature. I think what I would be referencing is any challenges or hurdles that we should be aware of with respect to building on the network in order to support AMI, and then later, obviously, looking at the opportunity to do fiber to the premise, fiber to the home for the population, based on using the existing backbone.
Sure. And we'll answer that with the information we know as we're just getting into the project, just collecting data and getting a lay of the land. I think one thing that's really important is let's, you know, that backbone, the existing fiber backbone has been built over a number of years. And you guys aren't so dissimilar from other municipal utilities where it gets added onto incrementally each year. And it was originally developed for utility needs more so than commercial broadband. So when we look at it, there's absolute value in that network that's been created. There's significant value that's been created for the city's internal operations. There's significant value that's been created for the electric utility and for, you know, the fiber leasing, commercial fiber leasing. But when we start looking at fiber to the home, we really want to make sure that the backbone's fortified, because there are areas of the backbone that are getting congested that we'll need to revamp, and we'll help you make some intelligent decisions on that, whether it makes sense to expand the existing backbone in the same running line, or maybe take an alternative route, right? Where you're building new versus using existing. You know, one of the things that's really important when we look at this and you're considering any new fiber expansion is, you know, when you build a new network, you know, it's all new at the same time. But if you're building a new network on top of an existing network, you really don't want to create any obstacles to that network's performance or success by leaning on the old network. So, you know, the old network, the existing fiber is doing its job, it's providing services, but we want to be careful leveraging existing assets carefully. We want to carefully leverage those existing assets by not putting too much burden on them. And in those cases, it makes more sense to build new than to try to integrate, you know, existing fiber with new fiber. So that's something that's important. We also think that, you know, as we look at expanding the backbone, it's going to be important to make it as flexible as we can, right? And that's a very loose term, but effectively when we think about all of the applications that can come off of this network, we're looking at, you know, smart city down the road, we're looking at IoT, we're looking at sensor networks, smart street lighting. Yeah, there's a plethora of applications that you want to be able to support with a network. So we want to design for maximum flexibility and scalability to be able to support those applications. And there's a number of design criteria we'll help walk you through that really establish that, so that when you're ready to use the network for other applications, even fiber to the home, it will fit very well into that framework, and you'll be keeping your costs down as much as possible. Jory, is there anything you'd like to add?
Just John, thank you. And just that as we expand the network off of the existing backbone and looking at new routes, we'll be uncovering new soils conditions and other things that will need to be evaluated. So we will be providing detailed information on how best to resolve each of these issues as they arise. So of course, building, like John said, off of something existing presents challenges, but at the same time, expanding off of that into new soils and areas within Palo Alto will also present challenges. And so we will architect a system that will be flexible enough to be handling your needs in the future for, again, not only fiber to the home, but many other applications as you develop your smart city initiatives.
Thank you.
Commissioner Scharf?
Yes, thanks. So one of our primary functions obviously is to advise the city council. And I guess I wanted to figure out what's the best way to do that, because I heard a lot of support for having them relook at phase 2 and 3 sequencing and trying to do phase 2 and phase 3 together and evaluating that at the city council level. And I guess I wasn't sure what the best way to do that is, you know, we've talked about it here, but that would require city council members to, you know, and I suppose Allison's on the call and I think Tom is as well. So the question is what is the best way to get that recommendation? And I heard a lot of support for it, but I also wasn't sure if every commissioner supported it. So, you know, I think we could take a vote on it, or we could sort of raise hands if we're unanimously in support of that, or have a discussion. I guess I wanted to get a sense of how you wanted to handle that, Chair.
Well, it's not an action item, so I don't think we can make an official recommendation, but we can certainly informally give each other and staff a sense of where we stand.
Okay. So I think that's fine. I think that's great. And obviously, you know where I stand, so we can move to other commissions for that. But I actually have been giving this a little bit of thought, and so I thought I'd raise it just briefly. I do think that when we do these, we should put an action item for everything, because things come up, and if we just talk about it, then it's either educational for us, but it doesn't quite provide the value to the city council. Then if something comes up, we can then have the authority to go ahead and make a recommendation. So that would be my thought when you're doing the agenda or whatever. And if anyone else wants to weigh in on that, but that's my sense of it to be the most effective in helping city council do what they need to do.
Duly noted. That's an interesting idea. We can talk about that for the agenda making process. Let's see, I know Councilmember McCormack has something to say. I'm gonna briefly chime in myself to informally say compressing phase 2 and phase 3 would make sense to me as well. And my question is about within phase 3, which includes making a business case. My understanding is that there have been attempts in the past to make a business case for fiber to the premises, and it has never penciled out before. And so my question is both what will be the methodology for the business case, given that we have 2 incumbents, it can be hard to get a sense of what the uptake will be of a third offering. And if you have any sense of what might have changed in the last few years that would perhaps indicate that a business case will pencil out this time.
Sure, that's a great question. So I think as we look at phase 3, the competitive environment is important. You have 2 incumbents in Palo Alto. Most of our community utility clients are in a very similar boat, 2 incumbents, both with strong packages, one, with a stronger package of maybe 500 meg or 1 gig cable service, a DOCSIS 3 based cable service, and the other, trailing with some form of DSL, but bonded together, getting maybe a couple hundred megs. So, when we look at the competitive environment, we don't think it's changed significantly. And we've seen this over the past few years as the cable companies have rolled out the higher speed products, and the municipal utilities have competed well against those, because what we found is it's not always about the speed. It's about the reliability and the price and availability, because a lot of times we're still seeing those competitive products very spotty in the market, and they're available in some areas and they're not available in others. So there's less than ubiquitous coverage across the service areas that are being provided by the cable co. So the other thing that's important, I think, when we look at the business case is let's not take sort of this home run approach to it, right? And I think that's an approach a lot of utilities have taken in the past, but we really believe, and we've seen a significant amount of success in incremental approaches that utilize existing assets better to start the fiber to the home business early, rather than going through sort of the traditional process, which is, okay, we're going to move into a 6-month financing window, then we're going to get our approvals, then we're going to order materials, and we're going to construct, which takes your Fort Collins in Colorado's building out right now, with significant bonding, a year and a half of additional planning and resourcing, and they're just now getting out to market. We think there's a much more tactical way to do it, and less visible, that provides the same value to the community, but builds around the backbone network, builds around opportunity areas, and then builds out from there. So the end goal is the same, to try to serve a significant part of the community as much of the community as possible. It's just a more incremental and iterative approach than the sort of big bang approach or the home run approach that we've seen in the past. We have a good example, and we can send some case study information on this, is a utility in Eastern Tennessee called Bright Ridge, which is a center for teaching hospitals, VA, and healthcare. It's a little similar size to Palo Alto, but they've taken an approach where instead of building in that sort of Fort Collins methodology where they bond $125 million to serve 60,000 homes, they've taken a more gradual approach of funding their deployment for $8 million a year with market rate loans between utilities, between funds, to build out portions of the city and the less dense areas. Equity was a really important aspect of this to them. So they didn't want to just focus in the most dense areas. They said, we're going to take a dense area and we're going to take a less dense, more, well, not rural, but more suburban area at the same time, and build that out over 4 to 5 years so that they can get service to everyone versus, a slightly more aggressive approach where it was 2 to 3 years. So, there's no right or wrong way to do it, but we've seen a lot of utilities be very successful with the incremental, gradual approach. And at the end of the day, they get to the same place. The incremental approach is just a little more risk adjusted, which is good for utilities, because this is hard. This is not an easy. It's not broadband is not an easy business. It takes dedication, and it's very very intensive in terms of resources and capital. But they get to the same place. Sometimes it just takes them a bit longer. So we want to look at both ways. We want to look at a number of different ways that it could be achieved, and help you identify the ones that are the best. And we generally, when we're doing that, we take a very sort of utility approach to it and a quantitative approach. So we start looking, instead of at the whole city, we're going to be looking neighborhood by neighborhood to understand what the build out costs are, what the payback on capital is, what the take rates could be. With quantitative data in the models that we use, we pull that into the analysis and get very granular, and then start to almost heat map the city and color code the city by different build out opportunities, so that you can kind of see that and then be able to merge those together. And for Bright Ridge, we did this, and that's how they came up with the idea of serving areas that were more challenging or higher cost to get to, with those that were less costly and more dense. And they came up with a happy medium that eventually built out to the entire community.
Thank you.
So I said a lot there, but those are just some ideas we have when we start looking at Palo Alto.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. Are there any commissioners who wanted to chime in on the idea of compressing phase 2 and phase 3 before we move to Councilmember Cormack? I know a lot of us spoke up already.
I guess I could say, I don't know if my comments were, clear or not, but I would certainly encourage a contraction of those. And I would also, the equity piece I'd like to see when we get there, because I think that's important. And I would also be interested going, we had this discussion with the recycled water. If there's anything in the meanwhile that construction projects can consider when they're rebuilding to put in conduit or something that would facilitate fiber, that would be super helpful to know sooner rather than later.
Great. And then we've already started that process. So we'll be looking at all your capital projects throughout the city and identifying ones that could be potential candidates for fiber installation.
Councilmember Cormack?
Thank you, Chair Forcell. Definitely heard everything you guys said. Appreciate that. My question is really for staff. I'm trying to remember when we approved the Magellan contract, exactly which project it came from. I'm looking at our proposed budget and the fiber optics fund. I wonder if someone from staff could refresh my memory about where the funding for phase 2 and phase 3 is projected to come from, and in which fiscal years?
So this is Dave Yen. So it's currently budgeted under the fiber CIP, under the fiber rebuild, but just a high level estimate right now. For the first phase, it didn't require construction, so we didn't build that out yet.
Okay, so that's why I can't see it in FO 16000. It just has.
There should be like I think there should be 750,000 in the adopted budget. I think in the proposed, it showed only like 350.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we don't have the printed out adopted one yet. Okay. So even between the proposed and final, it was moved up, and phase 2 and phase 3 would both be in the current fiscal year?
This is the first time we heard that, but we could definitely bring that to council after phase 1 is done. We could let them know this is UAC's recommendation and maybe merging the two together for the next phase if phase 1 is approved.
Okay, but right now you have a placeholder in FY 2022?
Not yet. I don't think we budgeted it yet just because phase 1 hasn't been completed. We will do a BAO for phase 2 /3 if phase 1 gets approved by council.
Okay, great. That's helpful. Thank you very much. And then I just want to say that I've been hearing it from a variety of places about the integration of fiber with potential electric rebuilds and undergrounding, and ideas about maybe starting at in a specific area that's interested in doing electrification. So super supportive of all those attempts. And I know this is the time. I know one of my colleagues talks about this is a good time to try experiments. So just wanted to say I'm happy to see that that's in there, and thank you for the details on the business case.
You're welcome. Cormac. So I just wanted to let you know that so when we do any kind of undergrounding or any kind of rebuilding on the electric side, we actually add, and we have been adding for probably about for the last 4 years, we actually add extra conduit on the electric side. So there's additional conduit in place just for the fiber expansions that we were going to do. So we will continue doing that as well. We do not do that today with our water, gas, wastewater side, just the electric.
Right. Thinking ahead. Thank you, Director Batchelor.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that presentation and good discussion. We are running.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes. Go ahead.
This is not to Magellan, it's to staff, I think. And it was more relating to the citizen comments, and I'll try to make this very brief. To what extent does the city own any fiber that goes way up Page Mill Road?
So Commissioner Jackson, as you heard from the citizens, the last stopping point of our fiber is actually to the water tower. As you heard, it's about 2,000 feet short that goes in that upper Page Mill area. So we have not extended any fiber past the reservoir up there.
So just speaking hypothetically here, if this group of people were to create a co-op and wanted to purchase dark fiber from the city terminating at that location, is that something they would be able to do?
I think that we'd have to look at our rules and regs right this period of time, since that dark fiber is only offered to commercials. But that doesn't mean that we can't change that and go to council and ask for.
No. I mean, anybody, any residential person, if they want to act like a commercial person, can trench across, get the permit, spend, $100,000 and get on the dark fiber ring. So, but there's a dark fiber. The city's fiber ring is 125 feet from my house. I just can't get there. But would you offer commercial broadband service on the dark fiber ring at that reservoir location?
I guess I can't tell you yes or no at this period of time. We'd have to take a look at that and see what we could do to move that fiber out to the street side away from the reservoir, because we would not make that final connection at the reservoir, but we probably could take a look at that. And that would be something that I would do.
I mean, I would just, I'll try to make this very, very brief. I mean, my heart bleeds for these residents way up there. I would just note that unfortunately the city currently is not in the business of providing residential broadband to anybody, as far as I know. And so the only thing that we have is this dark fiber network that is a commercial offering. That's expensive, but if a group of people got together and shared it and did a lot of hard work on their side, they might be able to do that if, in fact, they were able to get access to the dark fiber ring at or near that location. Because, you know, I don't think anyone's going to trench it up 2,000 feet. I don't think the city is going to, but I think that that would be the only viable way forward there, if in fact the city could provide them dark fiber service at that point of presence or that hop-on place. And I would be happy to talk to some of those people, not that I have any power on any of this, but I can't, none of those people who signed that thing provided an email address. My email address is readily available. I asked with Mr. Duritz or somebody else, Dulitz, to reach out to me and we can just chit chat. Not that I can promise to get anything done. That's it.
Through the chair, if I may, Chair Forcell.
Yes.
Just a point of process that didn't seem particularly hypothetical, Commissioner Jackson, and I think our usual procedures are to suggest that staff get in touch with them. While I share your feelings, I just suggest that staff work directly with them and then come back to you as a group or to the council as appropriate. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Cormack. Lauren Smith, Commissioner Smith, your hand is up.
I did have one final question, and I recognize we're keeping everybody for the breaks, but this question is directly to Dean and Dave. And I'm not sure if it's Dean and Dave or if it's a question for Magellan specifically. Are we losing an opportunity if we don't look at bringing forward phase 2? If we combine phase 2 and phase 3, I recognize that when we wrote the RFP, we wrote it in a way in which it gave the city an opportunity to, if you will, have gates and review what has been done in past, review and approve, review what they like, and then move forward to the second gate, move forward to the third gate, move forward to the fourth gate. So it was a nice way of controls. But I think there is an opportunity, and it appears when I look at the definition of phase 1 and phase 2 here on this slide that's being presented, it seems there is an opportunity for some concurrent tasks, for some simultaneous effort. And I'm just wondering if we are adding time when we may not need to. I guess that question is for Dean and Dave more than it is for Magellan at this point.
Dean, you want to take this or you want me?
It didn't matter, Dave. Either way, I can add if you want.
Okay. So yeah, I think it does make sense what you guys are advising. So we will talk amongst ourselves and also Magellan to see what makes sense the most given the eagerness to advance this. So can we get back to you in another month or so? Next month maybe, and give you an update?
Well, 6 months might be too long because by then phase 1 will be done, so we might as well move to phase 2. So I think I would be more on the tune of like 3 weeks to a month. But
yeah, next month we'll bring back this.
I think, Commissioner Smith, I think what we can do is we can give you an update by next UAC meeting on what we're going to do, and then because we'd have to go back to council and get an agreement.
Yeah. Okay.
To move forward with this. I mean, I think it makes sense. I've heard all the commissioners, and I think Dave and I both agree with that we would move 2 and 3 together. So, you know, we can get a report together and go to council with that and then see what council has to say.
Thank you. But again, I think we have general agreement that phase 2 and 3 probably could be combined. And I would agree that since this went to council, it has to go back to council. But what I'm suggesting is that we not only look at that opportunity for compressing schedule, we actually look at the opportunities of compressing schedule between phase 1 and the new phase 2 and 3. So compressing it yet again.
So totally on board with you, Commissioner.
Okay,
I totally understand what you're saying is that we would go back with to council with combining phase 1, 2, and 3 together, where it makes sense from
Great,
Magellan
thank you.
standpoint, what they can provide. We can have some conversations with Magellan and see what we can do and see where the lays are for phase 2, 3, along with 1, and see if we can shorten the timeline down.
All right, and don't wait to come back to us if that slows anything down. So you know our views already.
Absolutely, Michael. Understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. So checking the list for hands. All right, I think as everybody knows, we're running a little bit behind, but I still think we should take a 10-minute break. And then when we get back, we'll see if there are any opportunities to speed up through our last agenda item about distributed energy resources. So it's 6:15. Why don't we all come back at 6:25 and resume?
Great.
All right. See y'all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you all. Take care.
Welcome back, everybody. So our final item is a discussion and update on the adoption and integration of distributed energy resources in Palo Alto, which should be a good topic. And I'll start by asking if there are any members of the public that have indicated that they want to comment on this item. All right.
I have to stop sharing to see if there's any raised hands, and there are none.
All right. Very good. Thank you. So why don't we go ahead with the staff presentation, and we'll take it from there.
All right. So we have Shiva Solmanawi with us tonight, Senior Resource Planner, that will be doing the presentation on this report. Shiva?
Thank you, Dean. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Shiva. I'll be making a short presentation recapping some of the contents from the staff report, and then I'll be followed by staff from VMware to talk about their on-campus community microgrid project, which they are in the midst of implementing. And then if commissioners could hold off on the questions until we finish our presentation, and then we could take on questions. Okay, can we have the slides on, please? Okay, so what are DER resources? DER resources are energy resources which are in our distribution grid, potentially behind customer meters, which have the ability to significantly change the timing, duration, and the magnitude of energy use in our distribution system. To integrate and facilitate these customer-sited resources requires lots of coordination between divisions within the utilities and across departments. And this slide outlines the focus areas for coordinated operations of distributed energy resources. And I would like to acknowledge there are a cross-sectional staff involved with this effort. I'd like to thank for their effort in moving projects forward, as well as helping me compile this report. Next slide, please. So this is a table which you have already in your report. Just wanted to highlight it here. This shows the 7 distributed energy resources in our system since 2007. For example, electric vehicles, we estimate it to be 4,000 to 4,500 vehicles registered in town. Photovoltaics, more than 1,200 units. Energy efficiency measures, which we have implemented as a city, more than 40,000 measures. These include ranging from LED or CFL replacements to HVAC replacement incentives. Demand response, we do not have any customer demand response program currently. We had a few some time ago. We don't have any of them currently. We estimate about 220 energy storage systems in town, mainly in residential customer locations. And we also estimate heat pump water heaters to be about 44 currently in Palo Alto, and heat pump space heating, the central units, about 30 to 50. So that's what the table shows. And then to the right, you see the impact of those resources on the city's energy and demand profile. Next slide, please. So what are the highlights? We discussed this topic with the Commission about a year ago. So this is kind of a highlights of what we have progressed in this past year. So as commissioners know, we have issued RFP for AMI system, and we are in the process of evaluating proposals. We also implemented the MyCPAU new customer portal, the phase one being the bill presentment, bill pay and service notification and usage charts. And so that was completed this past year. And then we also launched a technical assistance program to assist customers install EV chargers and provide cash rebates. And then with VMware, we are facilitating their community microgrid project. And then we're also doing additional evaluation of the impact of DERs on our distribution transformer loading. Next slide, please. Looking forward for the next year, we'll be implementing phase 2 of the MyCPAU account, MyCPAU portal, and phase 2 being implementing tools for customers to analyze their water and energy usage patterns. We'll be continuing to implement customer programs with particular emphasis on multifamily home EV charging infrastructure. And thirdly, a focus also would be on low income or income qualified customers who can benefit from DER resources. We're also considering pilot scale retail rates that will minimize the barriers to electrification. And then AMI implementation would start in earnest by mid next year. And then we also are in progress, explore programs to encourage flexible load to reduce carbon and improve the city's carbon content of our energy resources. So those are the thoughts for the next year. Next slide, please. I think that's all I had. So if you could hold off on your questions, I would like to now invite Nicola Eckert, Vice President for Sustainability from VMware, to present their microgrid project program. And Nicola would be accompanied by Charlotte Carlson and Tommy Belosovic. So welcome, Nicola.
Fantastic. Thank you, Shiva. And hello, good evening to everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you tonight to share a little bit about what we're doing at VMware. So thank you for the invitation. For folks who don't know, maybe while the slides are loading, I'll share a little bit about who I am and VMware, the company. So if you're not familiar with VMware, we have a long-standing history and legacy in Palo Alto. Really one of I think Palo Alto's great technology success stories. The company is 21 years old, and today, from having been a small project out of Stanford, today is one of the top software companies in the world. providing critical infrastructure. We provide IT infrastructure and digital workspace technology that enables organizations around the world to build, run, manage, connect, and protect their applications on any device and any cloud. So, you know, as I've been listening to the meeting today, there's been discussion about smart cities and smart grid and IoT. All of that future is going to require the digital infrastructure that VMware is very much part of building and creating that future. So with that context, I am head of sustainability. I report into our technology office, our office of the CTO, which is really important because at VMware, we think about sustainability through the lens of innovation. And this project that I'm going to talk to you about today is an innovation project. Really, in terms of the agenda here, I'm going to try to keep it light. So if you move to the next slide, I really am going to cover the vision, the objectives, give you a sense of the scope of this initial proof of concept project, some of the use cases that we are exploring, as well as timelines, and then hopefully we'll have some time for discussion if there are questions. So from a vision perspective, you know, what is it that we're trying to accomplish here? And really our vision is to build what we're calling the first community microgrid in Silicon Valley. Folks are probably aware microgrids are not new per se, and this is not the first microgrid to be built. However, the approach that we're taking and really designing this from the get-go as a community effort, both in terms of being able to provide benefits, but also in the process of building something innovative to really create value for more than VMware as a company. So what I will say is this project started, to be honest, as a challenge from our CEO to innovate around sustainability. And so our objectives here really started with our goals around decarbonization and sustainability, as well as our operational goals around efficiency, resilience, as I mentioned, community stewardship being really the key value really that we wanted to build on and to contribute and expand the impact. And then the last piece here was the opportunity, because we are an innovation company, to use this as an opportunity to look out to the future and to explore ways that both our technology can support the distributed future that we all know is ahead of us. And so those are really the four pillars, if you like, of what we're trying to do. So on the next slide, just quickly in terms of, okay, outcomes, what are we trying to accomplish, right? So the obvious is our sustainability goals. As a company, we've set objective to get to net zero. Our CEO has challenged us on the timeline for that. And this project clearly fits into that, as well as, you know, our goal to add more renewables to our grid at the local level. The second piece is really a business driver, and I'll again, emphasize that while this project started from a sustainability perspective, it rapidly evolved into a business resilience and business continuity project. As folks, I think, in the meeting today can all appreciate the impact that we are starting to see around the wildfires and the reliability that, and concerns about the impact that has for us in terms of outages, rolling blackouts, and other challenges. So that quickly became something that the business really cares a lot about. And then in terms of outcomes around our collaboration and partnership, as I said, this is a cornerstone of what we're trying to do. I am not 100% sure, and maybe Shiva and team can keep me honest here, if there's ever been an MOU signed between a municipal utility and a company in building an asset like this, a community microgrid. But that's where we started. And a quick shout out to Jonathan and Shiva and team for their collaboration and openness. And I think that has really set us up for both success and for a great partnership here. Because as important as it is to provide this broader benefit, we also see the opportunity to share learning because, you know, I think we can all agree that the future is distributed. We're going to have to integrate new technologies and build a different system for delivering on the kinds of services that we need for our communities and businesses in the future. And then, so again, I've said it already, technology has a key role to play, and we're looking at this from that perspective. So just to double click on the why this project in our view really matters is because, you know, when you step back and you really think about both our business model, but the businesses that we support are extraordinary customer base that relies on our technology, often for mission critical applications. All of those businesses are dependent on the grid, right? You know that. And we've come to expect the stability and the security, but now more so the resilience and the need for decarbonizing that grid. So as computing becomes distributed in the future, you know, as I've said, you know, we can think about all of the possibilities with smart cities. That element of being able to build this future and enable computing at the edge and the grid resilience that's decarbonized, we think microgrids could be potentially key part of the mix here. And so hence why we're really excited and committed to this project. Next slide. Just briefly to give you an idea and to clarify, we have a very big vision for where we want to go. And with all good innovation projects, right, you start with a proof of concept. And so that is what we're doing. This initial phase of our program is to prove the case, frankly, that this makes sense and that these business capabilities and use cases really add value. And so this scope then is in essence 2 systems that are located on our beautiful campus and connected to two facilities, those 2 buildings for very specific reasons in terms of the use cases that we are exploring. One is a customer briefing center, which has a cafeteria attached to it. And then the other one is a building that has a gymnasium, which will be supporting our emergency services and critical infrastructure. So I think the other piece of this that we're really excited about is the capabilities around the mobile emergency operations unit, the MEOC, and the partnership with Chief Duker and his organization in demonstrating the capability of being able to plug in the MEOC unit into the microgrid to provide indefinite power in the event of an emergency or a power out or blackouts. So that again is something that I think is quite unique about what we are doing here. Next slide. Just a quick sense of where we are. The project is underway. We have started construction, and the photos on the left are actually pictures of the site that I haven't even seen myself as the sponsor for this project because of COVID-19. You know, we have worked through all of the challenges, and again, thank you to the partnership and support of the city in the process that we've gone through in the context of COVID-19 and business criticality. You know, it has actually turned out to be made things easier because we don't have a bunch of engineers on the campus, so there's fewer people on the campus. So you know, a lot of that work is being facilitated and streamlined. We are currently expecting one more permit that will give us the green light to continue with the project. But just quickly in terms of the approach itself and the use cases. If you flip to the next slide, please, give you just again a high level idea of the things that we are exploring. And I think things that make this project unique. The first is really this idea, and it's critical to IT, is the full building resilience and the blinkless capability. So the software that we are testing and validating will allow us that immediate blinkless failover for the whole building. And again, the idea here being really to test the limits of what we can do as an IT organization with that capability. Of course, then more of the traditional things like islanding critical loads, peak shifting modes, and then additional things around the demand response operating mode, potential grid services, and obviously being able to integrate with our building management system and our own IoT applications. And then, as I mentioned already, I think the one that we're really excited about is this islanding of the critical load and the auxiliary connectivity, and being able to support the city and the Department of Emergency Services with the MEOC connectivity. So with that, I think let me just leave you then with a quick overview of where we are and where we're going. In the final slide here is just a quick look at what's on the roadmap for us. And the key milestones coming up. So as I mentioned, right, there's 2 buildings, or at least two locations where the microgrid is being constructed, and the permitting around those 2 locations. We're fingers crossed we'll be able to check that off imminently and get the final permit so that we can move forward with the project. We're looking at then the time period in the 3rd quarter for us for the actual battery installation, and then towards the end of the quarter, the testing and commissioning, and ultimately, a substantial completion date around Thanksgiving. And then, we hope to be able to do a community demonstration, of course, and a community celebration of this project, which we look forward to planning once we declare victory on this proof of concept. And obviously that will happen in the new year, and or depending on the COVID situation, whether that will be we'll be able to do that as a in-person community event or a virtual digital event. So I think last thing to say, just in terms of immediate next steps, again, we continue the collaboration with CPAU on these use cases. Our commitment is to capture learnings and to share that, as well as, and this is important for us as we take the insight from a project like this to inform our strategy around the larger vision for this project and what that might look like over the next 3 to 5 years. And then, of course, the technology innovation, this is really a test bed for us, and we hope for others. I failed to mention earlier, in terms of community contribution, in addition to partnering with the city and CPAU, we have also built partnerships with Stanford University, and are supporting 2 grants. In fact, one with Stanford and a DOE grant on the future of microgrid technology, including some really technical work around security and sort of the open source platform component of this work. So and we think all in all here, this is a unique project. I think it's certainly a first for us. It's a first for the city of Palo Alto, and we're humbly learning a lot as we go through this process, and with this larger vision of what can we do to contribute to a better future for our immediate community, as well as lessons learned for, I think, a much broader audience as a result of this project. So again, my appreciation and gratitude to all of the city for their support on this project. And look forward to continuing that relationship. And let me close at this point, and happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Nicola and Shiva both. Let's see, it looks like Commissioner Scharf, and then we'll go to Commissioner Johnston.
Thank you. I really appreciated that presentation. It was really interesting. Maybe you could just fill in some, I'm having trouble completely getting it in my head. So it's basically solar with battery power on a microgrid, is that correct?
Oh, sorry, I skipped over that part. Yes, that's correct. My apologies. Yes, that's absolutely correct.
Now, are you gonna then, every day the solar power comes in, you store it in the batteries, are you drawing down on a daily basis using the solar power and the batteries? I mean,
yes, we are. And you know, and let me invite. And I failed to. Sorry, my apologies. I failed to fully introduce my team members, Charlotte Collingsworth and Tommy Belosevich, who are on the call. So Tommy is our technical lead, and Charlotte is our program manager. So Tommy, would you like to give Commissioner Scharf just a quick overview of the functionality and how we've designed the system?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Good evening from my side, and I apologize that I had my camera off. For me, it's I think 3:49 a.m. at this point, so I'll just try to keep it as short as possible. Basically, what we're doing is we oversize the battery to have sufficient power for the resiliency. So we have limited solar generation available on the buildings. Due to some internal limitations, we were not able to put additional solar that would actually charge the battery, the full battery, as much as we would need it for this particular project. So what we did ultimately is we made sure that we will also be using the utility power to charge the battery, basically. And in terms of how we would cycle the battery, we would likely cycle it on every single workday. Specifically, what we're trying to do, we're trying to align the peaks with the utility so that we also cut the utility peak at the same time when we would be cutting the VMware peak. Obviously, with the COVID situation, we need to figure out what those peaks would look like after the buildings are occupied again, right? We do know how it looks like at full occupancy. We will be learning, how it looks like after the COVID situation. So in general, yes, we're looking to basically charge and discharge the battery on a daily basis. We're looking to keep a certain charge in the battery or state of charge in the battery to make sure that the battery stays operational for a longer period of time, so we cannot drain the battery all the way. And then we will be happy to explore a number of additional use cases with TPAU, as Nicola said.
Okay, that was very helpful. Thank you very much. So just so I understand, there is times in the day when, solar is booming during the middle of the day, and electricity, sometimes you actually have to pay people not to take, you have to pay people not to take your electricity, basically. So at that point, you'll be using that to charge your batteries to some extent, right? And then you would use the power that you would get from us. I mean, and then you would use that power during our peak periods when electricity is most expensive and we have the most issue with buying expensive electricity on the grid. Is that what we're talking about, working with our utilities to do that so it's a win-win?
So what the system will have a smart self-learning algorithm that will be using different inputs, including not just the information around the usage, information about the peaks from the utility, information about obviously power pricing, information about the weather, information about the state of charge of the battery, and will be dynamically dispatching the battery in combination with the solar, and will then be obviously seeing at what point does the battery need to be charged by the solar panel, or at what point does the battery need to be charged by the utility grid. So this is basically what the algorithm will tell us. What we need for that algorithm is obviously data. So we have a lot of meter data in the buildings, right? Smart meters, sub-meters. We have a lot of data from coming in from the inverters, from the battery inverters, from the solar inverters, and so on and so on. Obviously from the main meter, from the utility. Basically, the idea is really to use all the data and optimize it in a way that kind of makes most sense. So just to give you an example, let's say our peak would be estimated to be a little bit
earlier than the utility peak, right? So let's say our peak would be around 3 p.m. or around that time, while the utility peak would rather be around 5 or 6 p.m. when people start getting home from work, right? And start using electricity, turn on their air conditionings and so on and so on. So if we can get that time frame when we're starting to use use the battery versus when we end the battery, this is how we can kind of align those peaks and then charge the battery, for example, overnight, right? When nobody is actually using that much power.
Exactly. No, that would be great. So, though I'm not sure that overnight is when. I'm sure you can figure it out, but I mean, I thought we had excess electricity on the grid during the middle of the day, frankly, and that at night you don't have any solar, and so that's not when you'd want to charge. But I think that's changed. But I'll leave that to staff to work with you. But I thought that was the way it was. I just wanted to also ask the quick questions on when you say the community involvement in the grid. What do you really mean by that? I mean, I heard charging the Miwok emergency vehicle, but you know, are we talking about if there's a rolling blackout that it would be there for emergency services, or I mean, what are we talking about in terms of as opposed to your grid versus a community grid?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. And you know, I think the way that we've approached this is to think about it in multiple dimensions of communities. So obviously, there's our direct employee community, right? The employees that come in and out of that campus every day. And then more broadly, our, you know, the city and CPAU and kind of these varying levels. So let me just also be clear about the vision for this project. Like the bigger vision is to have this community element built into it. So community from the sense of, you know, how do we rethink the kinds of infrastructure, the kinds of policy that will support microgrids at scale in the future. For the POC specifically, for this specific proof of concept project, we've had to limit that to the, you know, in terms of tangibly what we're talking about, it's providing that service and that access to the city to leverage this resource in the form of supporting the Miwok and being able to provide access to the indefinite power supply for that unit. So that's the very tangible, immediate thing that we're contributing in the proof of concept. But as I mentioned, you know, we're also, a key piece of this is the learning, right? And being open to sharing, you know, kind of the good and the bad, and what we've learned in the process. And so we believe that is a community contribution, as well as, you know, the technical access to the resource. You know, I think longer term and under our broader strategy, there may be many other iterations of that. And, you know, together with some of the folks at the city, we brainstormed some of those initially. But that would be, you know, something that we would look to continue to partner on, you know, as this project continues, and you know, we assuming we're successful with the POC.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'll let someone else ask you some questions.
Commissioner Johnston.
Thank you. So first I want to congratulate VMware and CPAO staff to work this project out. I mean, to me, it sounds like very innovative. It's something that could provide a lot of benefits, and I really hope the proof of concept turns out well. I wanted to understand exactly, there was a point on one of your slides where you say at the 4-hour resiliency full building. Do I understand that to mean that, and first of all, I understand there are 2 buildings involved. So do I understand that to mean that the battery system will power the full building for 4 hours, assuming that the grid has gone down?
Yeah, Tommy, do you want to go ahead and give a little bit more color to how we're thinking about that blankless capability.
Absolutely, no problem. So basically, what we're trying to test, and I think it's two different answers to your question. So the first answer is yes. We are planning. We size the battery in a way that we think it's going to supply enough power for 4 hours for the whole building, right? When it's let's say at average occupancy, right? Because we cannot control the occupancy in, let's say, times of emergency if there are a lot of people, but in average occupancy, we estimate that it's going to be enough for 4 hours of resiliency power if the utility grid goes down. We are also planning to test a innovative blinkless transition from the grid connected to the islanded mode without basically a need for UPS batteries, which obviously can save a lot of costs on that end. So just through the software, because the software can sense kind of outages on the utility grid based on certain parameters, and can then, based on that, just isolate the grid prior to actually the grid failing in a very short time frame. We have specific, very fast breakers that actually can isolate and then generate the microgrid basically from the electricity grid and islanded. So that's the first step. And the first step, we are basically taking the whole building, the building as a whole offline. Then in the second step, now, if we are, let's say, half an hour or 1 hour into that resiliency event, we realize, for example, from CPAU that, something, it's a major emergency or it's going to be a long lasting power outage. We are able to only isolate what we would define as the critical loads, basically just one portion of the building. Why are we doing that? Because we only have limited solar generation available for that resiliency, right? We do not have enough solar generation. We're just limited to the solar that we currently have on the rooftop of that particular building. And then just to really account for, let's say the differences in solar generation in the winter and in the summer, what we are doing is, or let's say on cloudy days or sunny days, we are able to dynamically, through powered breakers, really expand or compress that part of the building that actually gets the power, and including just, focusing the power specifically to the MEOC, right? Or specifically to only certain circuits that we want to power, just really based on that available solar, that we can at least dynamically have a certain portion of the building that will always be running throughout the year, even if there was no power for like months.
Well, I think we really appreciate the fact that you thought that there might be power, surplus power to help the city out, because obviously resiliency is something that we in the city are very concerned about. So again, I say it's a very exciting project. I hope that the concept proves out to be very successful, and I hope that this will be kind of a inspiration to other people to build similar projects, because that could really be a big help to the city in a situation where the grid goes down. So thank you.
I'm looking for raised hands. Commissioner Vice Chair Siegel.
Yeah, it's an exciting project. I was there when you had the ribbon cutting, so it's fun to see some moved dirt now.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, in terms of the collaboration and the lessons learned, I think you were talking about using smart meters already. And so I don't know if that's part of the project discussion, because I know we're talking about resiliency and whatnot, but it would be great if there are any lessons learned on that as PAUAC is talking about rolling out smart meters and we don't have that expertise yet. So I'd appreciate that. And then my other question was, on the Stanford side, that's more on a study? Are they using any of the power, or might use any of the power? Or is it more on the academic side?
Great. Laura, great. I think you certainly sense my appreciation for seeing dirt moving. And I think that's a lot of that it speaks to the challenges and the process of doing something completely new. It takes takes longer than I certainly necessarily expected. And so to answer your questions on the, the smart meters, I think that's something we can take offline with our team. And, certainly in the spirit of what we're trying to do, this is, as it connects to learning, happy to explore that. And your question about Stanford. So yes, the short answer is that it's focused primarily on the research, innovation, and sort of application. And this is we're working with the Stanford Bits and Watts group within the School of Energy. And in terms of the actual operation of the microgrid, and I think folks are familiar that the VMware has a long-term lease with Stanford for the property, and so they have been integral and are a key partner with us and have been involved all the way through the project. And I will say they are watching with great interest because part of this larger vision is potentially connecting various components of the city into a smart loop. That's way down the line, but that is the spirit of the collaboration. Is one, support for the practical support for our project as and working with the real estate organization, and then secondly the research and strategy.
Commissioner Danaher?
Yes, we're way past schedule. I think we're losing the utility on this discussion. I'm hoping we can move this along. I welcome VMware to the field. There are other companies doing this already. I'm sure you're going to do a fantastic job, but I'd rather hear more details after it's up and running and see what new learning there is. That's just my plea to move along the schedule if we can.
Fair enough. I still do want to give, if there are other commissioners who want to get a word in, give them the opportunity. I will save two of my questions and only ask the very brief one. What is the battery technology that's being used for the energy storage?
So absolutely. So we're using the Ultichem batteries, I think we can give you more details on the chemistry if you like. But Tommy, do you want to say anything more about the batteries and
so
our approach and our rationale? We're very intentional about the choice of battery in terms of reliability, safety, and bankability.
Yeah, so as Nicholas said, we made sure that while this is a POC, we do not want to experiment in terms of batteries that would be cutting edge batteries that are not proven, that are not bankable. So this is why we decided to go with a very proven and a bankable system that has been deployed widely, around other projects, which is an LG Chem battery, a lithium ion, and a nickel, magnesium, cobalt chemistry.
Great, thank you. All right. Councilmember Cormack, did you have any thoughts?
Just happy to thank Ms. Eckert and Ms. Collingsworth, and Mr. Bolosevich would probably like to go back to sleep, I think, at this point. 9-hour difference. So it was very kind of you to come. I appreciate it. And I echo Commissioner Danaher's comments. We look forward to seeing this when it's completed. I'm grateful for the partnership.
Likewise.
Likewise.
Thank you.
All right, so our last item is selection of potential topics for future discussion. Usually this bunch is full of good ideas at this point. All right. Maybe we're feeling pretty tapped out at this point.
Marshmallows. Sorry, I'll go, Chair, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I really enjoyed the discussion with Magellan. I'd like to bring them back and suggest that we bring them back in the future. I don't know when that is, maybe dependent upon whatever happens in the next 4 weeks, but it would be nice to have them back.
All right, thank you for that. If there are no additional suggestions, I'm wondering if we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, can we do this one where we just speak up if you oppose adjourning or raise your hands to agree? All right, great. Thanks everybody. And
thank you.
We will see you all in about a month.
Thank you. Thank you. Everybody have a good evening. Thank you.
Thanks, you too.
All right.
Thank you, Lisa.